There's a strange kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can be sitting in a room full of people, friends, family, conversations happening all around you, and still feel like you're not really there. Like you're watching everything through glass. You smile when you're supposed to. You respond when someone talks to you. You exist in the same space. But internally, something feels disconnected. Have you ever wondered why? Why some people, no matter where they go, never feel like they truly belong? And more importantly, why this feeling often starts long before they even realize it exists. Psychologists have been studying this for decades, and what they found is uncomfortable. Because this feeling usually isn't random, it's learned. There's a concept in psychology called belongingness theory, first proposed by psychologists Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary in 1995. They found that the need to belong isn't optional. It's a fundamental human need, as essential as food or sleep. Your brain is literally wired to seek connection. So when someone feels like they don't belong, it doesn't mean they don't need people. It means something taught their brain that belonging wasn't safe. And here's where it gets deeper. Children learn whether they belong by watching how people respond to them. Not just what people say, but how they react. Do they listen when the child speaks? Do they acknowledge their emotions? Do they make them feel seen? Or do they ignore them, dismiss them, overlook them? Because when a child repeatedly feels invisible, their brain adapts. Not by demanding more attention, but by expecting less. Over time, they stop assuming they belong anywhere. Not because they don't want to, but because their nervous system learned not to expect it. And this adaptation is incredibly powerful. A 2012 study published in the journal Psychological Science found that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain, specifically the anterior cingulate cortex. In other words, your brain processes exclusion the same way it processes injury, which raises an uncomfortable question. If belonging feels like safety to the brain, what happens when someone grows up without consistently feeling it? They don't stop needing connection. They just stop trusting it. This is why some people become observers instead of participants. They listen more than they speak. They analyze more than they express. They learn to exist on the edges of groups rather than inside them. Not because they're antisocial, but because psychologically it feels safer there. Have you ever noticed how some people can spend years around the same people and still feel like strangers? That's not a personality flaw. That's conditioning. There's also another layer to this. Psychologist Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people, HSPs, found that about 15 to 20% of the population processes social and emotional stimuli more deeply than others. These individuals notice subtle shifts in tone, facial expressions, energy, things most people miss, which means they're also more aware of when they don't fully belong, even when no one else notices. And this creates a strange paradox. They understand people deeply, but rarely feel understood themselves. So they adapt again. They become more independent, more self-contained, more comfortable being alone. But here's the part most people misunderstand. This independence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's protection. Because when someone learns early that belonging isn't guaranteed, they stop building their identity around external acceptance. They build it internally instead, which is why these people often seem calm on the outside. But internally, they're used to standing alone. And the strangest part is, they don't always realize why. They just know they've always felt different. Not better, not worse, just separate. But here's the most important thing psychology teaches us about this. Your brain isn't fixed. It's adaptive. Neuroscientist Dr. Dan Siegel's research on neuroplasticity shows that the brain constantly rewires itself based on new experiences. Meaning the feeling of not belonging isn't permanent. It's learned. And anything learned can be unlearned. But it starts with awareness. Because you can't change a pattern you don't see. So let me ask you something. When was the first time you remember feeling like you didn't belong? Was it recent? Or has it always been there? Because the answer to that question explains more than you think. And if this video made you realize something about yourself that you never had words for before, you're not alone. There's a reason you found this. And there's a reason this felt familiar. Subscribe if you want to understand the psychology behind the things most people never question. Because the next video might explain something you've been feeling your entire life, but never understood.